3CF Moreno Valley.
The following program on KCAA is pre-recorded.
I'm your host, Steve Matley. We are on KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, serving all of Southern California. Or you can catch us on your favorite podcast platform. We are also on Roku and YouTube on the Building Solid Foundations channel. Today, I want to talk to you people out there that do any kind of contracting. And I work with a lot of real estate investors, people that do fix and flips, they do value add multifamily, they building ADUs, a lot of different projects that involve doing some type of contracting. And my past, before getting into the development and real estate investing world, is I did work as a professional construction manager and I was a general contractor. And I see a lot of people get in trouble when it comes to doing the contracting. And there's really three things you need to make sure are included in any contract. The biggest problem I see actually is people that don't have contracts. They bring people in to do work on their projects and they don't have very well written, spelled out contracts, or they have a very simple contract provided by the local contractor they hired, who may or may not have very strong contract language in there. Certainly probably not good language to protect you as the homeowner. And there's really three things you need to make sure are always in every single contract, even if you're hiring someone you really know, maybe it's a relative, maybe it's a best friend, and you feel like, I don't really need a contract for that. Well, contracts aren't just because we want to play gotcha legally. Contracts are really to make sure both parties understand the same idea of what we're doing. By reading through a contract, both parties have an opportunity to read through what they've agreed to, and they can object to something. They can say, that's not exactly how I thought we were going to make this happen. And so they get a chance to talk that through before they get into a project and it becomes too late. There's a reason that a lot of times these contracts, even between friends and family members, all of a sudden end up in claims and suits and those type of things. And that shouldn't be the case. So before I start, I do want to let you know I'm not an attorney. I did not go to law school. I just have a lot of experience in construction. I encourage you, I implore you, please, before you get too involved in anything that is working with contractors or signing contracts for anything, talk to a good transactional attorney, a contract attorney. Pay the money, find a good expert that you can trust to review those things to make sure that you understand, and not just a matter of they review it to make sure everything looks good from a legal standpoint. Do you understand what's in there? Can you talk with them and have them explain what that legalese means in plain English so that you understand what you're signing and what you're agreeing to? That is of paramount importance. So I encourage you, find the right expertise before you do anything. So what I'm going to walk you through is really just more basics and common sense from the layperson's point of view if you're going to get into this type of work, and what are the essentials, the three key elements that have to be in every single contract if you're going to hire somebody to do repairs, remodels, rehabilitations, new construction, landscaping, anything that you're hiring, even demo and hauling. Make sure you have a good contract. So there are three things that we have to balance in the project. And so it doesn't matter if you're doing a fix and flip, if you're doing remodels on your own home, if you're adding a bedroom onto the back of your house, converting a garage, building an ADU, whatever it is. There's three things that you have to balance out. At the same time, they tend to have, they're conflicting, and that is the time and the money and the quality of the work, or the scope of work that has to be done. The scope of work just means everything that's supposed to be done. So that's everything that's been on the plans, all specifications, what kind of material, what quality of materials, how much of this, how much of that. All that is the scope of work. What sequence of work has to be done. Are there any specialty suppliers or contractors you have to hire? Paperwork that has to be filed, permits and fees that have to be paid, all those inspections, all that is the scope of work. It's everything that is expected in order to get the project to completion. And a lot of that is the quality level. Not everything has to be great quality. If you're building something to rent it, you want it quality-wise from a performance standpoint, but you don't need it really quality-wise from an aesthetic standpoint. You want it renter's grade because between tenants you're probably going to have to repair or replace a lot of things. So there's no reason to go with the top notch of every kind of finish in there. You want to use something that's readily available, easily repairable, fairly bulletproof when it comes to damage, and not overly expensive. If this is your own personal house, then maybe that quality standard's different. Maybe what you want is granite countertops, you want top-end appliances, you want wood flooring. Those are things that you would want on your own home to make it very livable, very comfortable, and very nice that you probably would not want to do if you're renting a place out and you know the tenants will be turning over. So the quality level is a big issue to determine. And the two things that play off of that is the money and the time. How much money do you have to spend? Now, most investors I know don't have unlimited sources of funds. In fact, they have fairly tight budgets. They have a certain amount of money they have available to do the work, and they really can't go much beyond that without really having to change their lifestyle to some degree. And so they have their budget that is for the project, and it needs to stay within that. On the other hand, you have the time issue, and time and money tie together. If you're borrowing money, there is interest, and interest is a time component of money. But there's also the patience factor. You know, every time, if you're building, say, an ADU and you're going to rent it out, every day that it's not finished is a day that you're not collecting rent on that, and you're still paying money for it. So time, money, and quality tend to be the three things you're balancing, and to get higher quality takes more time and money. To save money usually means you're going to have to spend a little extra time and lower the quality. If you want to do it very quickly, get it done fast, you're probably going to sacrifice quality, and it's going to cost you more money. You'll be paying overtime for labor and those type of things. So there's three things that reflect on that in your contract, and that is what I call the 3 P's of a contract: price, period, and performance. Price is how much money is that going to cost to get this task done. Period is how much time is this going to take, and we have to define that time accurately. And then P is the performance, and that's the scope of work or the quality that's happening, what exactly has to be done. Those 3 things are the basics. Every contract must spell those things out. What it's going to cost, how long is it going to take, and what exactly is supposed to be done. So how do we figure that out? Well, first, let's dig into price a little bit. There's different ways to price a contract. You can price, there's different pricing methods. There's different ways of figuring project cost. People forget to throw in overhead on top of the cost. If they're going to do the work in order to sell it, there has to be a profit portion on there. Are there billing and payment terms that affect the price? And figuring out what your total contract amount is, including everything, including fees, permits, insurance, anything else that you need to put in there. So the price is not just the cost of materials that you figured out by walking down the aisles of Home Depot and figuring out what the prices are and trying to determine the quantities. So there's different ways of pricing a contract, and it depends what you do. Most of us think of the idea of, well, you get a bid. It's the lowest bid. Get a bunch of contractors to give you a quote. And contractors kind of like this because it makes their lives a little easier. They have a set plan. Their billings are really easy. All they do is say, okay, I'm this % complete, so you owe me that. And anything that's outside of it, they charge you extra for. So there's a place for that. The lowest price is probably the lump sum bid is probably a good approach if you absolutely positively have got to know the dollar amount before you start. If you have a hard dollar amount and you know that's the amount you're going to pull the loan for. The only problem is that works better for new construction. For reconstruction, there's so many unpredictables that it's really hard to guess what's really going to happen once you start opening up walls and taking things apart. You never know what you're going to find underneath. And so that's where there's other methods. You can do time and material. Time and material is you track the labor and you track all the material cost, and then you pay the contractor back for that time and for that material plus a profit and overhead portion of it. That is a way to be very accurate, especially on rehabilitation projects where you don't know what you're running into. But there's a downside to that. That means your pay applications are a little more hairy. There's a lot more due because the contractor actually has to submit to you invoices and trip tickets and labor sheets and those kind of things, a summary of all the cost, the equipment rental receipts, those type of things, and then you have to agree to those and then mark those up, and that's a lot of work to go through. And I've worked on projects like that, and those are very difficult. Insurance jobs tend to be like that a lot. So that's another method. There's a method where we just figure everything out by a unit, where we just say, okay, look, all included, labor, material, equipment, anything that we need is all included. We've averaged it out to say that every square foot of flooring is worth this much, and every lineal foot of wall that we frame and drywall and finish up and paint is worth this much. And so there's a cost per unit, per square foot, per linear foot, per cubic yard, whatever it is. And you can do that too, but again, that's something that has to be quantified and tracked, and the billings are a little more difficult, but it's a great way for projects that don't have a known scope of work. If that scope of work is uncertain because you're doing a rehabilitation project and you don't know what's going to happen when you open up walls and find out what could be in there or what's not in there, you find out there's termite damage and dry rot, you find out it's out of code and it's got to be brought up to code again. Broken trusses or something. You have to figure those things out, and that unit price contract can be a way to go through that. There's a few other pricing methods that we'll talk about when we come back from the break, and then we'll get into talking about how you figure out the timing and how you figure out the scope of work. So again, 3 P's of a contract: price, period, and performance. We're talking through the pricing right now, and we've got more to talk about with that, and then we'll get into the other 2 parts of that when we come back from the break. This is Steve Matley on Building Solid Foundations Radio, and we'll be right back after this short break.
FireUp Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. FireUp Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing, and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. FireUp Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
Hi, this is Steve Matley. As a construction professional, I know the importance of selecting the right contractor for the job. Power Solar employs only professional installers. Power Solar will provide a knowledgeable consultant to help analyze your current electric bill, identify site placement, and correct solar technology for your home. Contact KCAA Producer at gmail.com for a free financial savings proposal with no obligation, or call 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Again, that's KCAA Producer at gmail.com or 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken.
Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations Radio. I'm your host, Steve Matley. Today, we are talking about the 3 main components of a contract, the 3 P's: price, period, and performance. And before the break, we were talking through price. We talked about there's different ways of pricing a contract. We mentioned there was the typical lump sum or lowest bid that we're all familiar with. And I'll talk through a little bit later why that may be good or may be bad. Time and material, we talked about unit price. The other method is what's known as cost plus. So cost plus is where a contractor comes on board, and what they do is they agree with you that if you reimburse them for all of their costs, labor, materials, equipment, any subcontracts, any additional ancillary cost for, say, fencing, porta potties, what's known as general conditions, they'll show you what that cost. You'll pay them that, and then what you agree with, what they're really bidding on, is the percentage above that you'll pay them to cover their overhead and profit. So maybe they say, look, if you just cover all the costs as we go along, and then pay me 10% above that, and that'll cover my overhead and profit. Now, is 10% the right number? That's going to depend upon what you're doing and how complicated the project is. Generally, the smaller the dollar amount of the contract, the higher that percentage will be. Obviously, if you're doing a $10,000 job and you're only paying somebody 10%, nobody's going to do that work for $1,000 of profit. It's not worth their time. If you're doing $1 million project, they might do that for 2% because that's a pretty good chunk of change they'll get out of it. So it just depends on what you're doing. So the percentage isn't always a set amount, and there's no one number that is the guiding factor. You work that out with the contractor. So let's talk about what are those costs that they're going to be looking at. Well, the costs include the materials themselves, and as we all know, materials have got quite expensive. Lumber, steel, concrete, anything that's got asphalt in it. It's supply chain issues, it's fuel cost for transporting. All that has caused labor prices, or material prices, to go up very, very high, and it's moving all the time. So material costs are a big issue. Labor. Labor is very expensive right now, but more so than the cost of labor is the availability of it. It is almost impossible for builders to find highly qualified, skilled trade workers. It is extremely difficult out there because the industry is booming. There's a very high demand and a very short supply. And a lot of that goes to, honestly, our own culture. Our culture for the last 50 plus years has made it a part of our public education system to discourage people from going into that kind of work. When I went through school, the shop classes were still there, but they were being wound down and being replaced, unfortunately. The schools became feeder systems for the Cal States and the UCs, which unfortunately, 20% of the students may go on to those kind of colleges. About 80% don't, but they were left behind, really because that's, educators are running things. And I'm not knocking educators, but that's just the nature of the way they think. They're assuming everybody needs to go to college. And the trades really lost good people by ROP programs and shop programs going away. And the idea that as a culture, and not just the schools, but in our movies and our TV shows, our general pop culture, we were painting trade workers as if they were somehow losers compared to college-educated people, which is actually comical when you think about how much trade workers can make right out of high school, right out of their trade programs, versus how much a lot of college graduates make. And the trade workers didn't have all that student debt. So it's a little bit counterintuitive there, actually. It is very difficult on the body. So a lot of times trade workers want to shift over when they get a little older into the management side, but that's good. They have experience then. But a lot of that ties into why there's such a shortage of labor, and that shortage of labor is what's causing such high prices. It's a supply and demand issue. Equipment. Equipment is all the backhoes and the pile drivers and the skip loaders and those things that you need to do the work. And equipment is a cost that the contractors have to cover in order to get the work done. Subcontracts, that's all the work that you are not going to do. You're going to contract things out, and then the contractor you hire may hire other contractors to do things. Nobody is an expert at everything. I probably don't want the drywall hanger being my electrician because that's two different trades with two different specialties that do very different things. I want an electrician doing electrical work. I want a plumber doing the plumbing work. I want a mechanical expert doing the mechanical work. I want a roofer doing the roofing. So they will subcontract a lot of that work out to specialists. And so that's a cost. We have materials. Materials are what we're doing ourselves, labor, equipment. Subcontracts will include any labor, materials, and equipment that subcontractor is using. It's just under one price. And then we have what's known as general conditions, and those are all the things that we spend money on for a project that aren't actually part of the project. So, for example, we're going to put a fence around the project to keep it secure and keep it safe. Well, the fence isn't part of the project. When the project's over, the homeowner doesn't keep that fence. That goes back. But we have to pay for it. So that's a general condition item. If there was a porta potty out on the site, though that's not the bathroom that's going to be used by the house, that was only there for construction. That's a general condition item. So those things are expenses that are legitimate expenses of doing the project that are not an actual part of the project but need to be there. So material, labor, equipment, subcontractors, and general conditions are the main areas you're going to be spending money on a project, and including, and then there's the soft costs. Soft costs are things like permits and fees, design, if you're going to be paying a designer, architects, landscape architects, interior designers. And so when you put this all together, you're going to get your total contract price, and that's going to be all your project costs, your material, labor, equipment, subcontracts, general requirements. It's going to be all your overhead, the overhead for the contractor. The contractor's entitled to overhead. That covers their cost of doing business. And the contractor's profit, the contractor's entitled to profit. Now, let me talk to some people out there that may think, well, if you negotiate well, then maybe the contractor is doing this for at or below their cost. You don't want that. The contractor doesn't want it. And if they agree to that, that either means they're in trouble of some type, they're desperate for money, or they don't know what they're doing. In either case, you don't want them on your job. You also, there's no point in having the contractor who's going to lose money on your project or not make any money. If they have other jobs, guess which projects get prioritized? The ones that are making the money, not yours, because yours doesn't make any money for them. So yours is the one that'll get the delays when they have a shortage of resources. Not enough people to go around. The materials have to be split around different projects. You're the one that's going to get left out because your project doesn't make them any money. Also, you don't want a project that becomes financially strapped, a contractor becomes financially strapped on your project, because if they end up going out of business for some reason because of that, which will happen if they do that a lot, who's going to do the warranty work? You're going to have a warranty, but nobody's going to be there to do it because they went out of business. So that's crazy. You don't want your contractor losing money. You want them to make a reasonable amount of profit and be there. You're also going to pay for bonds if they're required. Not all projects require bonds. Small projects don't, but a lot of projects do. And if you're doing any work on public right-of-ways, for a matter of fact, let's say you're doing some driveway work and you have to take out some of the public sidewalk and replace it, you'll probably have to put a bond on that part of the project because you're on the city's property there. Insurance is a cost. You have to have insurance, usually at least third-party liability insurance, general liability. You'll need workers' comp insurance for the contractors, have to have that, and they're going to need to have auto insurance at a minimum. There may be some other insurances. You'll have some other costs, contingency costs, which is, what if your estimate wasn't perfect? Well, guess what? It's probably not going to be. And so you have a little contingency fund, which is this is my miscellaneous money to use for the things we didn't think about, or the things that as we took the building apart to rebuild it, we found unforeseen issues. And you have permits and inspection fees to your local agency. You have to do plan check, you have to pull a permit, pay for the inspections, and whatever filing fees you have. And so these are the prices that they'll end up in your contract when you get that done. So that's the price portion of your contract. And I would tell you that here's some tips for that. First, pre-qualify all your contractors. Make sure that you have checked their references, you know their financial situation. You've looked at past projects they've done, you know the quality they do and whether they finish on time. What's their reputation? Have 3 to 5 of those for each trade. That's hard to do these days, but try to do that. They're all busy out there. The lowest bid might be your most expensive option. My experience has been when you get the lowest bid, it's because somebody left something out of the bid, because they're desperate for cash flow, because they're brand new and don't know what they're doing yet. That's not a great deal. So be careful of that. Now, if the lowest bid happens to be within 2% of all the other bids, well, maybe that's a legitimate lowest bid. But in most cases, be careful of that lowest bid. Make your contract part of your bid or proposal package. So if you ask the contractors to give you a price, if you want a certain things in your contract, provide that contract as part of it and say, this is the kind of things I'm going to expect you to agree to in the contract ahead of time. You don't want to go through this process, select that contractor, and then find out, well, I'm not agreeing to those terms, and now you've got to start over again. Have detailed contract terms and conditions ready to go, and this is where having a good attorney, usually there's going to be template documents you can use, basically boilerplate contracts, but you've got to adjust those to fit your project, and that's where a good attorney comes in to help you with that. An attorney that understands construction contracts. Ensure that your scope of work is accurate. If you're going to do lump sum bids, the lowest bidder type stuff, make sure your scope is very accurate. If you can't do an accurate scope because you're doing a rehab, you're going to tear something out and rebuild it, there's no way to know what you're getting into, then the lowest bid probably is not the way to go. Then use another one of those methods, probably a cost plus, but you could use a unit price if you wanted. If you don't know how to validate material and labor costs, you can use price indices. You can Google it, go check your local suppliers and kind of validate that. Understand, though, that your price and the builder's price may be slightly different, and then you can negotiate overhead and profit percentages with the builder. If you're doing cost plus or those kind of things, that's going to be, you're just going to be reimbursing what their costs are, but you can negotiate that overhead and profit percentage, but make sure it's reasonable. So we're going to have to take another short break. When we come back, we're going to get into the time and the performance part of it. So we've covered the first P, price. We have to go through the second P, period, and then we'll do the third P, performance. We're talking about the 3 keys to any contract for construction. This is Steve Matley on Building Solid Foundations, and we'll be right back.
FireUp Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. FireUp Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. FireUp Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
Real Men of Real Estate with Steve Matley, construction manager and real estate developer, business owner, and educator.
Did you know that right now there's 22,000 units deficit?
Tunde Ogunwale, real estate development professional, Naval Academy grad, and veteran with a deep understanding of the public sector process.
All of us want to live in thriving communities.
Brian Fox, real estate expert and investor, dedicated to helping hundreds of clients make money in real estate every year.
There's so much housing going in.
The builders are begging for more land.
Future company can come in, lease up space to employ those people who are living in the homes.
We have to put the housing in place.
They either have to have houses,
They want to make sure that there's a strong employment.
logistics centers, things like information hubs. We are a shipping economy now. There's economies all over the country where their prices are doubling and tripling.
I love how New School is able to help me greatly with my career.
Because they actually have experience working in the field. The greatest thing about New School is the fact that there are so many different disciplines, which allows you to really understand and get a good insight into different types of design. And I think it's that whole changing mindset of what design can really do for a city, and this is kind of the place to be.
This environment cultivates creative thinking.
Hi, this is Steve Matley. As a construction professional, I know the importance of selecting the right contractor for the job. Power Solar employs only professional installers. Power Solar will provide a knowledgeable consultant to help analyze your current electric bill, identify site placement, and correct solar technology for your home. Contact KCAA producer at gmail.com for a free financial savings proposal with no obligation, or call 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Again, that's KCAA producer at gmail.com or 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken.
Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations Radio. I'm your host, Steve Matley. Today we've been talking through the 3 Ps, the 3 keys to contracting. If you're doing any type of remodel, restoration, reconstruction, new construction, and again, this is really targeted towards the people I know that are doing this as part of real estate investment, building ADUs, any type of construction work where you have to hire contractors to do the work. And we talked about the first P, which is price, and we went into detail on how to identify the right price and the pricing methods and tips to figure out the correct price to put in a contract. So the second P is period, the time or the schedule. Every contract should have a specific time frame put into it. You can identify that as a specific calendar start date and calendar end date if you want, or you can just specify that as a duration, a number of days, and then what will constitute the start of that. For example, giving a notice to proceed, authorizing the contractor to move ahead. And then that would start the clock, and maybe the clock is they have 150 days to finish the project. You do need to identify what those days mean. A day is not necessarily the same as a day when it comes to contracts. There are work days and there are calendar days. If you specify things have to be done within a calendar day, 120 calendar days, well, that's about 4 months. 120 work days does not include weekends or holidays. And so that's going to be potentially even could be up to a month longer, depending on how many holidays you have in that time period. So you want to make sure that you have specified what a day means. Is that a calendar day or a work day? If you have a project and there's a specific date that things have to be done by, perhaps a move-in date, or you're doing this and there's a tenant coming in, then you need to specify that. And then the time will be defined by the hard end date, meaning you have said by this day on the calendar, you will be done. So how do we figure out our time or our schedule? Well, you start with making a list of the project activities. You have to list all the things you have to do. You have to walk through that scope, that performance of the project, walk through that scope of work and figure out what has to be done. And this is where a contractor should be working with you if you're not an expert in this to help you with this. They can tell you what needs to be done, but then you have to work out what is a reasonable schedule with them. Once you have a list of the project activities, you put them in order, a sequence. Some things are pretty obvious. For example, you have to have your foundation in place before you put the walls up, and you have to have the walls up before you put a roof on it. Those are pretty logical things. Other things may not be quite so apparent. There's other things that you're not sure what order they may go in. And again, this is where contractors kind of have their idea and their system. And if you have an idea of a contractor that you can work with, that's fine. When you put this out to bid or you get the proposal on it, ask them to say, don't just give me a price, give me your schedule. And I don't want to hear just dates. I want to see a schedule of what you're doing when. Tell me, when are you doing the grading? When are you doing the foundation? When are you framing the walls? When are you putting doors and windows in? When are you doing the roof? When are you going to put the drywall up? All the different things that have to be done by task, so you can see how it lays out and you can see the logical sequence of it, and that helps you to figure out, is this a logical time frame? You don't want to give a builder, a contractor, a unreasonably short time frame that's just not possible, because then you're setting yourself up, because there's no way they could possibly achieve that. On the other hand, you may have to be able to drive a schedule to keep things on track. You don't want things to go on forever. There's the kind of joke in the business that the contractor comes in and starts things, open everything up, and then disappears for months, and then may come back and do a little more and then disappears again. You want to make sure that in your contract you have put a schedule in there that says this is where we need to be, and that you can hold them to that. So by your duration, number of days, or by a hard end date, and use those contract terms to enforce it. So here's some tips to manage that project time. Make sure you embed the schedule into the contract. Like I just said, make sure that schedule is in the contract and it was a part of that bid or proposal. And require it to be as part of the bid or proposal when the contractor gives you that. Include things like lead time and inspections, time to set up, what they call mobilize, set up on the site, and to break things down and clean up afterwards. That should be included in that schedule. Lead times are examples of items that maybe you have to order ahead of time. Right now there's shortages, especially appliances, cabinets, countertops, things like that are back ordered. They're hard to get hold of. And so your schedule, your reasonable time frame, has to include time to get those items ordered as early as possible and delivered. And that means you as the owner need to make those decisions fast. You can't put those off and say, well, we're not putting the kitchen in for a couple of months yet, we're still framing. No, you may have to get those orders in now. So you don't want to be the person that holds the project up where the contractor can't get the items because you didn't order them soon enough with such a backlog right now. That's lead time. So get that done as quick as possible so that orders can be made and shipping can be underway. You want to track the schedule weekly throughout the process. Every week, check the progress and say, are we where we're supposed to be this week, according to that schedule you worked out with your contractor. And again, enforce using the contract conditions. Your contract should clearly spell out that you have to stay on contract or what the consequences are if they do not. And require justification for any extensions. If the contractor says, look, we just need more time, require justifications. Now, a legitimate justification might be those materials that we need are still on a boat and they're not here yet, and they're not expected to be here for 3 weeks. Therefore, we can't install them on time, and that's a legitimate extension. maybe the city comes in and tears the street up in front of your house and they can't make deliveries during that time. That could happen too. So those are legitimate extensions. What's not a legitimate extension is we guessed wrong, or I couldn't find enough people to work on this. That's the contractor's responsibility to cover those things. So make sure you're managing that and require justification before you extend it. I will say if you ever make any changes to either the money or the time on the project, you make sure there's a change order in place that you've approved. And that means you ask the contractor to give to you a formal request in writing that says, this is what changed. That means there should be some kind of a change in the scope of work and that performance piece of it. And this is what's changed, and it's going to cost us this much more money, and it's going to take this much more time. It's clearly spelled out, and they need to be able to back that up. It's not just because, well, that sounds right to us. It has to back it up and make sure it's reasonable and talk to them. Just because they submitted it doesn't mean that's the way it is. You have to work that out. And again, try to stay as friendly as possible. I'm not an advocate of arguing, debating, fighting over these things. I am an advocate of having your contractor as a partner, and that's a good contract, and managing the contract well actually is good for the contractor too. And it helps you partner. You're a partner with that contractor getting this thing done. You don't want to become an adversary with them. So that's tips for managing the time on the project. Understand that time is as important as money on a project, always. Okay. If you are an owner of a project, think about the money you're paying in interest on your loans, especially if you have hard money loans. A lot of times our real estate investors will have hard money loans to do repairs, and those are higher interest. And every day that loan is out, it's costing you money. So if you have a contractor that's causing you a 2, 3, 4 week delay, well, an extra month at 13, 14% interest, that gets expensive on a construction loan. So you want to make sure that you are very carefully managing this and holding your contractor's feet to the fire. Make sure that you've got teeth in your contract. And again, this is where having your attorney that looks over this, that understands construction law, understands construction transactions and contracts, they can help you with that. There are standard things in the industry that are used for these to help with these. So managing the money, managing the time are huge pieces of it, of any kind of construction contract. And you don't want to get the money ahead of the time of the payment, and you don't want to get the work ahead of the money. What I mean by that is when you have you're paying for this as you go along, you've got monthly pay applications. You don't want to overpay where you've paid for more work than is done, because if something happens and that contractor can't finish, you've paid for work that's not done, and now you've got to pay someone else to do that work that was supposed to have already been done but still hasn't been done. You're paying for it twice. On the other hand, you don't want to have a contractor who's done work and not been paid for it, because that means they paid for materials, they paid for labor, they paid for equipment, they paid for all the parts and pieces they needed to make it work. They paid administration and supervision, and they are not reimbursed for that yet. You've not paid them. So they essentially are financing the project for you at that point. You need to be aware of that, so you don't want to delay payments. One of the biggest problems with smaller projects is that the owners are not paying the contractors on time when they should. One of the things that may be in a contract, and it's legitimate, is the contractor may put something in there where there's a surcharge or a penalty for paying late. Or they could also alternatively give you a little discount for paying early. And that helps them, because contractors live and die by the cash flow. Understanding that, again, being a partner with that contractor and making sure that it works for both of you. So the work and the money or the payment all during that project should be at the same level. If they are 40% done with the actual work that is in place, not materials ordered, but actual work that's in place, then you should be 40% paid on the project at that point. And it'll always be a little bit off, because they do have to finish the work before they can invoice it, and then you have to have time to look at it, process it, and cut the check. So it'll always be a little bit behind, but it should be pretty close. We're going to come back after this and for our last segment, and we're going to talk about that last piece. We've covered price, we've covered period, and when we come back, we're going to cover performance. That is the scope of work on the project and how to effectively manage that. I'm Steve Matley on Building Solid Foundations Radio on KCAA. We'll be right back after this.
I love how New School is able to help me greatly with my career.
Because they actually have experience working in the field. The greatest thing about New School is the fact that there are so many different disciplines, which allows you to really understand and get a good insight into different types of design. And I think it's that whole changing mindset of what design can really do for a city, and this is kind of the place to be.
This environment cultivates creative thinking.
Real Men of Real Estate with Steve Matley, construction manager and real estate developer, business owner, and educator.
Did you know that right now there's 22,000 units deficit?
Tunde Ogunwale, real estate development professional, Naval Academy grad, and veteran with a deep understanding of the public sector process.
All of us want to live in thriving communities.
Brian Fox, real estate expert and investor, dedicated to helping hundreds of clients make money in real estate every year.
There's so much housing going in.
The builders are begging for more land.
Future company can come in, lease up space to employ those people who are living in the homes.
We have to put the housing in place.
They either have to have houses,
They want to make sure that there's a strong employment.
logistics centers, things like information hubs. We are a shipping economy now. There's economies all over the country where their prices are doubling and tripling.
Hi, this is Steve Matley. As a construction professional, I know the importance of selecting the right contractor for the job. Power Solar employs only professional installers. Power Solar will provide a knowledgeable consultant to help analyze your current electric bill, identify site placement, and correct solar technology for your home. Contact KCAA producer at gmail.com for a free financial savings proposal with no obligation, or call 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken. Again, that's KCAA producer at gmail.com or 951-551-1350 and ask for Ken.
Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations Radio. I'm your host, Steve Matley. Today we've been talking about the 3 Ps of contracting to do any type of construction work, especially if you're a small real estate investor, if you're doing ADUs, if you're doing rehabs, restorations, repairs, any of that kind of work, or even if you're doing new construction from the ground up. And we've been talking about the 3 Ps are price, period, and performance. We covered price, which is the cost, the money that's going to be in the contract. It needs to be clearly stated. We've covered the period, which is the time, the duration of the contract. And now we need to talk about the performance, and that's what's known as the scope of work. And that means everything that's required in a contract to get the project done, whatever is required. That what's included in all your contract documents. Your contract documents are going to include any plans that were drawn up by architects, engineers, landscape architects, interior designers. Those plans, that's part of your contract documents. What also is also your specifications or notes, and that is what defines, well, your plans show that there's going to be so many square feet of tile in this particular area. The specifications tell the contractor what kind of tile that is. What quality, what color, what size, what thickness, what kind of grout, what kind of color of grout, what type of mortar, any kind of underlayment. So that's all in the specifications. So that has to be part of that too. It's going to include the time, that schedule we talked about, the period. It's going to include the price. It's going to include all terms and conditions of the contract. Everything related to paperwork that needs to be filed, inspections, permits, sign-offs, whatever is required to get the project done. Any architect or engineer notes that are part of the project, that are in the plans, the specs, or included in approval, conditions of approval from your local city. Your permit has conditions on it. Any closeout requirements? Closeout requirements are things like, once they're done, you've got a set of plans for what they built. And let's say they built you a small addition to your house, a 2-room addition to your house. And what they finish with when they're all done probably isn't exactly what was originally drawn. while they were building, certain things changed. Things had to be moved or adjusted just because of the way things worked out during construction. There's no way that what the architect drew is going to be exactly what gets put in. So you have to what they call as-built drawings. So you have to mark those up and have a set of what actually was built, because once everything's closed up and it's behind stucco and drywall, you're going to want to know what's behind those walls for future work, or when you sell to other owners. You're going to want to know what's back there. You want to know exactly which stud cavity that pipe is running through, so the plumber knows in the future if they have to open anything up. So that's part of it. Warranty manuals. You're going to have, say, appliances that went in the kitchen. There's owner's manuals and warranty manuals on those things. You need to make sure you have all that information, that the contractor's given that to you. That there's keys made. They put door sets, locks on everything. You make sure you have keys and copies of those keys so you can access those things. If you have, garage door openers, gate access, any of those kind of things, you need to have the right instructions and the right devices to make those operate. So that's all part of closeout, is getting all that finished up. It's everything that the contractor needs to do to turn things over to you, the owner or the resident who's going to live there. Also, what's included in all these contract requirements is change orders, and that's anything that changed the contract. I mentioned that right before the break. And that is anything that is a change to what we're doing will also affect our money and our time. And so again, change orders, just like contracts, because they're an extension to the contract, they're an add to the contract. A change order also must include all three P's: price, period, and performance. What is the cost of doing this, which is different than what we contracted already? What is the amount of time that will be required to accomplish this additional item or this change? And what exactly is this change? That's the performance. So all three P's have to be in your main contract and any changes to the contract. And so that's how you're going to manage your performance or scope of work. I mentioned before the break, when we were talking about the schedule, that you're going to have a list of all the activities. Well, that list of activities is a part of this scope of work. It's a breakdown of what you're going to be doing. So those are what you want to manage and make sure all that's being done and it matches what you contracted. It matches that in quality. It matches that in the materials that you have selected or what your architect has selected. It matches that in the way it is assembled, the way it's put together, so everything matches what's in your drawings and your specifications. That is managing the performance. And again, all this is spelled out in your contract, so you have a full scope of work, what's to be performed. That is in the contract, along with the price to do it and the period of time that it takes to do it. That is what's going to make a contract that works for both you and the contractor, and it's spelled out clearly so there's no misunderstandings. The worst thing that happens on projects is when you just have a misunderstanding. So how do we make all this work? Well, here's a few tips on managing performance. Have weekly meetings with your contractor and make sure that's in the contract. They will have weekly meetings to update you. They don't have to be long, arduous meetings. They need to be enough to update you on what's going on. If it's a very small job, 15 minutes is fine. If it's more complicated, maybe an hour. Before you give them access to your site, your house, whatever you're working on, have a kickoff meeting. Make sure that they're coordinating so you know what to expect. Make sure all your insurance and permits are up front. You've got everything in place. Nobody should ever step into your property to do any work unless they've got their insurance in place and they've got certificates to prove it. Visit the site a lot. Make sure that you visit. If you're doing a project and it's out of state, hire somebody out there or have a friend that you know out there that you can trust that'll stop by and visit from time to time. It's amazing how much better projects go when there's eyes on it. The contractor doesn't really like that, but as long as you're not interrupting them, bothering them, or trying to tell them how to do their job, visit the site and then make sure you hold their feet to the fire. You're not telling them how to do their job if you're noticing they're doing things that are not in the contract. Require from them written weekly schedule and cost updates. Make sure they submit that to you and show you where you stand. Keep records. All this paperwork, and a lot of it's electronic now, but make sure you're keeping everything, whether it's physical paper or whether it's digital. Keep those in files where you have them, so you have record keeping for everything you've done, all your schedules, money, everything. And have very solid contracts. Read every word of it and insist on a clean and orderly site. Make sure that's in the contract too. And that's the basics of managing contracts: price, period, and performance. And if you do that, you'll find you'll have very successful projects and a partnership relationship with the contractors. This is Building Solid Foundations Radio and KCAA. We will see you next time. I'm your host, Steve Matley, and we'll see you next week.
KCAA and KCAA Internet Television, the station that leaves no listener and no viewer behind.
Hi, I'm food critic Alan Borgen, and I'm excited to tell you about Ray's Shanghai Bistro, located next to Redlands DMV on Lagonia in Redlands. Ray's Shanghai Bistro offers the largest and most delicious array of traditional and original Chinese dishes available in the Inland Empire. Some of my favorite dishes are the house-made pot stickers, the crisp pork spare ribs with garlic, their unique spicy lamb with bamboo, the sweet and tangy deep-fried orange peel beef, and the savory basil spicy shrimp, plus lots of vegetarian dishes. Whether you dine in, pick up the food, or have them cater your next party or special occasions, you will see why Ray's, spelled R-U-I'-S, Shanghai Bistro, is truly the best Chinese restaurant in the Inland Empire. Their website is raysshanghaibistro.net. That's raysshanghaibistro.net. R-U-I-S, shanghaibistro.net. Happy eating. You won't be disappointed.
Tehibo Tea Club's original Pure Pau de Arco Super Tea helps build red corpuscles in the blood which carry oxygen to our organs and cells. Our organs and cells need oxygen